Welcome back to Oh and Another Thing, your favorite news and politics podcast, your favorite news and politics YouTube program. Wherever you listen, wherever you tune in, thank you again for joining us today. A quick bit of housekeeping here for you. Before we start, your host, Vince Petrone, producer Bertram Beans, fact-checking us today again is Giovanna. She's in the studio to fact-check us and keep us straight and on task here. Quick bit of housekeeping. Yes, the YouTube link for the last episode. You noticed there was no YouTube for the last episode. My video editor on my laptop was giving me fits. It would not work, and then I would get it to work. Like, it was doing this thing where I would turn it on, and then it would take like 2 minutes to start up, 3 minutes to start up. I know, how inconvenient for me. And then it would just not respond, and I would have to shut down the program and keep doing that like 4 or 5 times. So I did it 4 or 5 times, and I got to finally start working. Then I start getting this message about how my audio driver is just not there. So I can't hear anything I'm editing. So it wasn't going to happen on Tuesday. We have since updated the drivers. Everything is working well today, we hope. So we will hopefully be able to get you the YouTube link for this week so you guys can at least have the video medium. Not a big deal, though, because as you know, it's the same exact product as you get over on Spotify. So if you're someone who missed the Tuesday episode and you want to go back and catch it, go check it out on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you get your podcasts at. You can find us there, subscribe to us there. And if you're someone who's listening on Spotify and you want to see us on video, go check us out on YouTube. We're there. Usually we have it up. We just had some technical difficulties this week, so we'll be back today, hopefully, with the video version on YouTube. Just search for Oh and Another Thing. You'll find us there. All right. Welcome back. We have a jam-packed show for you today. Not as jam-packed as the Tuesday pod, which, again, go back and check out if you missed it. We talked about a lot there. But we have a lot and enough to talk about today. Coronavirus is back on the rise. The president has no plan for his reelection strategy. We're going to talk about blindly following people. We have a really great pod for you, so let's dive on in. This is coming right from the Washington Post. I'm just going to read the headline here. Florida is reporting 8,942 new COVID-19 cases on Friday, blowing past its single-day high of 5,511 cases set on Wednesday. It's the 19th day in a row the state has hit a new average high. Average cases are now up about 77% from a week ago, and get this, 526% since Memorial Day. So, stop wearing masks, right? Florida also announced Friday morning that bars are going to close immediately. Texas is also going to be closing their bars. They're also dealing with a huge surge. And, well, that's pretty much the situation there. It's not good in Texas or in Florida, which is upsetting because we know Florida was supposed to be home to all of the sports that were going to come back to us. We were hoping to be able to have spring trainings in Florida. It's the least of the issues of this, but what's the NBA going to do? The NBA's whole plan has been to have this shortened end of the season and then this playoff all in Florida, all in Disney, at all these resorts and hotels in Disney. What are you going to do now? Can you still do that? Do you feel safe doing that? Do players feel safe doing that? I know I sure wouldn't, because I have to go back to work on Monday, and I already don't feel safe about going back to work because I saw today that New York State, it's a tale of two areas. So, downstate, here in the Big Apple, we're doing great. Not to brag too much. I don't want to brag. But we're doing great here in the Big Apple with the coronavirus. We have it down a little bit. We're doing a good job wearing masks. We have less than 10% positive cases, which is what you're hoping for. I think I saw today that we were at 2% or maybe even less than that for positive cases. And as we stated, everybody else is on the rise. However, upstate had an uptick in positive tests. Granted, they're doing more tests in New York State than anywhere else, which is really good for us. But they're still finding more cases upstate, and they're finding more than they were last week, which makes me a little bit nervous to hear because, as I'm sure it's gotten to most of the listeners by now, New York City plans on going into Phase 3 on July 6th. That's the plan. Now, Phase 3 has 50% indoor dining. Sports clubs can pretty much open back up. Basketball, handball, everything that's happening at the parks already just can happen legally again. So that is good news there, I guess. It just makes me nervous because you hear about all these places that started opening up. You're hearing about For starters, Florida. Florida was planning again on hosting large events. They weren't going to be filling the stadiums or having fans or anything, but they were going to be having sports. They were going to be having media personnel. They were going to be having coaches, players, physicians, doctors, all that. Well, physicians and doctors, same thing. Sorry for being redundant. They're going to have team physicians, full staffs going to these places, going into Florida. That was the plan, and Florida was going to be okay with it. Now look. They had bars open, they had restaurants open, they had beaches open. Everything came back in these places that are now seeing these huge spikes in cases. There is no debating that no spike is good. Okay, even the fact that there was, I think, a 17% spike upstate from what I think Nate Silver was reporting on Twitter a little bit ago. 17% increase upstate, not great either. But the amounts we're seeing in places like Florida and Texas and Arizona also, weren't you telling me yesterday Arizona had a 189 or 219% increase? 249% increase in 1 month. And that's they were saying less testing too, because they reported in Florida and in Arizona yesterday that they had done less testing than the week before. In fact, in Florida it was 77 less tests, I believe. And they still found more cases. So it's not the testing that's causing these cases to pop up. It's that these cases exist and that we're finding them, which is a good thing. But that goes against what the president believes, and that is something we'll talk about later on in the pod, because we have a lot to talk about with people just blindly following and accusing the other side of blindly following, us of blindly following. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But there are starting to be some real issues in these states that just blindly followed what their state leaders were telling them, what their governors were saying. Greg Abbott in Texas downplayed this for the whole first half of it, saying it was not anything to worry about until now. Now he's had to swallow his words and go back and re-shut down the state, essentially. Ron DeSantis has had to do the same thing in Florida. And now you're having hospitals in, I believe I saw Houston or Austin, near capacity again in Texas, or at capacity. It's a bad situation. We haven't beat the coronavirus yet. And The Onion has been doing these great jokes, technically, about how America is entering phase 3 or entering phase 4 or phase 2 of ignoring the coronavirus or pretending it doesn't exist. Whatever they're saying. And it's funny, but it's starting to get to be too true, because we're seeing the product of doing things too fast, of not taking our time and worrying more about the bottom line and worrying more about the economy than we are worrying about workers' lives and people's lives and customers' lives. Honestly, just regular folks going out to dine aren't thinking about how great of a risk they're taking, how many lives they're putting at stake, what exactly is online every time someone goes out and goes dining. And I don't want to speak ill of the dining industry or speak ill of the food and restaurant industry, but I got to tell you, I wouldn't feel safe going to a restaurant right now, just with this in my mind, knowing that I was eating off the same fork somebody ate off of probably like an hour ago. Like, that doesn't seem like a healthy thing to be doing whenever there is a highly contagious disease that is spread, at this point, as far as we know, mostly from spittle, mostly from human-to-human contact. So why would you put yourself in an enclosed space? Why would you share utensils? Why would you use an old plate that somebody used? Like, dining out just doesn't seem like a smart or enjoyable thing to do right now. So what's our rush to get to it? I understand that businesses need to run and people need to make money, but we have systems in place right now for working people that we can get money while we're not working because of the coronavirus. We need that extended past, I believe it ends in July, or it ends at the end of this month. No, ends at the end of July, the extra $600. So that will need to be extended, obviously. But right now you're looking at, again, we'll stick with Florida and Texas here, 2 states that are reaching the level that New York was at before New York started to flatten the curve, or whatever you want to call it, getting the cases back down. They're just getting to that place now. New York was there about 2 months ago, and we're just now starting to open up with hesitation. So maybe this is something that people in Texas and Florida should brace for now. And California, Los Angeles. Los Angeles had more positive tests the other day than anywhere else. I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday. It might have been Wednesday. Anyway, these places that open too soon are now having to deal with the repercussions of that. And I hope we just all take notice and stop pretending this isn't real. There's a staggering, listen. There's a staggering number of people online, and it was gross to be on Facebook yesterday because there are so many people that just do not believe this still, that do not see this as real. They still think it's a hoax, even though it's happening in, I don't want to say Republican-led states or anything like that, but it's happening in Republican-led states too. It's not the blue state issue they keep trying to make it on Facebook and on Fox News and where these people get their news from. There were 39,327 new infections reported by state health departments on Thursday. That beats the previous record earlier on. And we have, you could say this is a second wave, but it's not. This is not a second wave. We haven't even come down from the first because cases never started going down places, nationwide, I should say, before we all started reopening and doing these sequenced reopenings and all that. And it's just too soon and too much for us to be doing. It's not safe to be going out yet. I don't find it a great idea even to do the outdoor dining. I'm going to be honest. I don't think outdoor dining is a great idea right now either. Come on in here. Yeah, come on in here. We have an expert on hesitation about outdoor dining coming in. Here comes Giovanna, our hesitant on outdoor dining expert.
As previously stated, I'm very hesitant about outdoor dining, and I will tell you why. You're walking outside. You walk by a restaurant. When you walk by people eating outside at a restaurant, do you change your attitude in any sort of way? Do you change the way you live your life? No, you don't. You just keep walking. So, you could cough. You could sneeze. You could do one of those, I hate when people just do the, you know those? When people just do a little sniff. Do you want that when you're eating outside at a restaurant? And we've seen they're supposed to be using takeout containers for everything and like to-go cups. But we walked by a restaurant the other day that was using wine glasses. And I know there's probably other restaurants that are still using wine glasses and stuff. Those germs, we've seen so many stats about how far they can travel. I read something the other day that said an exhale, somebody just exhaling like a can travel 4.5 feet.
Let me see it.
And then a cough can travel 6 feet. A sneeze can travel 26 feet. Has anything ever terrified you more than the fact that a sneeze can travel 26 feet? Do you still want to eat outside? I don't.
And it's very reasonable things and very.
Yeah, I don't think that's being being neurotic.
Yeah, it's not neurotic
totally
or anything.
reasonable.
That's totally reasonable. And
if everybody wore their masks outside, then maybe we wouldn't have to be so scared. But you guys have seen people wear their masks in the stores where it's legally required, but not everybody wears one just walking outside.
The problem is the necks. People think that the coronavirus goes through the neck holes. Your skin holes on your neck. That's why they wear the holes. Pores. Making a joke because they all wear
they wear it.
You get it. All right. Anyway, said her piece. All right. So things aren't any better yet. The numbers are down, but the virus is still here, and we need to be careful, or else we're all going to end up in Georgia and Texas again. And that's why I'm very hesitant to have New York going into phase 3 in like 2 weeks, because I don't think we're there yet. Because just because our tests are down, because our positive rates are down, it doesn't mean that everyone has been tested. It just doesn't mean that we're ready. These numbers are going down. And I just want us to be cautious, and I want us to be careful when we're doing things. So if you are someone who's going to go out and eat someplace, be careful, and you better tip well, because people are putting their goddamn lives on the line so you can have a fucking avocado toast somewhere. So just make sure that you are being good, wearing your masks, doing the distancing when you can. Bring your own cups or whatever. But just make sure we do this right, or else we're all going to end up in Florida and Texas again, and I don't think we can afford it. They just said, the CDC just said in testimony to Congress that for every positive tests that they conduct, every person that comes back positive for coronavirus, there's likely 10 more infected people roaming around that do not get tested and never find out that they have the coronavirus because they don't go get tested, but that's still 10 more people that are infected with it. 10 more people. So you're looking at, let's say I get tested, there's likely 10 people around me. There's not 10 people in this room right now, but Giovanna would have it, Bert would have it,
Well, you can compare it to, like, if people are getting things back saying they're getting, like, 100 new positive tests a day, that's really 1,000 new
Yeah, okay,
tests
so,
a day.
yeah, that makes sense. So, I don't know if you heard Giovanna, but 100 positive tests a day is really like 1,000 positive tests a day, because that's the 1 in 10. Thank you. I don't do math well, so that's, thank you for being there for that. Anyway, and it doesn't help that we have leaders like Ron DeSantis, like Governor Abbott in Texas, and President Trump. And prime example of that, we'll dive on into everything about him right now that we're going to cover today. He won't wear a mask. He's refusing to wear a mask. He was even planning on going to his golf club in New Jersey this weekend to play golf, a state that is now requiring people to quarantine for 2 weeks if they're going to come into the state from some place that has had an increase in positive tests, i.e. Arizona, i.e. Oklahoma, i.e. where else? Michigan. All places the president has been in the past week, and then he wanted to go to New Jersey so he could spread the virus there. He just doesn't care. He doesn't care about this anymore. And if anybody tries to tell you on Facebook or otherwise, or any conversation you have with anybody, that this president has done a good job leading us through this, or flattening the curve, or anything like that, you need to fight that immediately. Show them that the president no longer takes part in these coronavirus task force meetings. They haven't spoken with the president in 2 months on the coronavirus task force, they say. Today is their first meeting with first press conference, and the president's not going to be there. The president of the United States is not going to be at the press conference for the pandemic that is literally shredding his country to pieces right now. We have 122,000 people dead. We had 1.3 million more people apply for unemployment insurance last week, and he's not going to the task force meetings on the problem that's causing these problems. And maybe that's for the best, and if that's for the best, that's still not good news for the president. It's still not good news for any of us. If the president isn't... Oh boy, okay, so if the president isn't allowed into these meetings or discouraged from going to these meetings, it's because he's counterproductive and doing more harm than good in these meetings. That's why he's not part of the task force anymore. He either doesn't care, or they've chosen to keep him out of it. It's one of those two things, and neither of them are good. And it's important to realize that one of the major problems we're having right now is that people will not wear masks in a lot of these places. We saw the footage come out of, I think it was in Florida, that town council meeting, but I think there were some clips from California too, and in Orange County, where people are fighting tooth and nail with their public leaders and their city councils and their mayors and governors and everybody up and down the system to not wear masks. Acting if it's some kind of act of, what'd someone call it? They're not some kind of sex slave, some kind of form of domination by the government over us. It's not. All we're asking you to do is care about someone other than yourself for, like, I don't know, how long does it take for you to get from your car to a fucking door to Walmart? Like 30 seconds? Like, all we're asking you to do is put a mask on even while you're outside, while you're walking, and while you're indoors, inside of these wherever you're shopping or wherever you're dining. Just wear a fucking mask. Like, that's all we're asking you to do. It reduces the rate of the spread. We talked about how things fly. The germs can go 26 feet. This is 26 feet, right? The sneeze, 26 feet if you're sneezing. If you have a mask on, it doesn't go that far. Like, these are actual steps that you can take to protect not just yourself, but everybody around you. And if you're someone who's not interested in protecting the people around you, you're an asshole. And if you're an asshole, I don't want you to be a part of this country anymore. This is where I'm at. I am to a point where I would rather people just fucking leave if they don't want to be part of a country that is good and cares about everyone. Because that has not been what we lived in. And I know that's a naive thing for me to even request to live in, because it's not going to happen. But we can push for it. It would be nice if everybody else was willing to make those changes and adjustments and sacrifices of wearing a fucking mask, some big sacrifice that is, just to help maintain the health of everybody. And the president won't do it. Now, on the other hand, in fact, the president has said he won't instruct people to do it. It's not his place to do it. But on the other hand, Joe Biden, the person running to take Donald Trump's job from him, essentially, says that he will mandate mask wearing. There is a difference in leadership, and this is where I think it is important to to put aside everything we dislike about Joe Biden and remember that there's at least leadership qualities there. One of the things that I got into an argument about on Facebook this week was whether Trump is a good leader or not. I went back and forth with this guy who was a basketball coach back home. In fact, he's the person responsible for me not playing basketball through the rest of my high school experience. Fucking hated him as a coach. I'm going to say it. Like, I don't care. Like, he was not a good coach. He ruined my passion for the game. There was an incident where I gave myself a concussion. And instead of allowing me to, like, take the practice and, like, kind of rest, it was a stupid situation. I ran into the bathroom wall. I was rushing to get back. I don't know why I was running late to practice, but I was rushing to get my sneakers on and all this. And I ran headfirst into the bathroom wall. And I was concussed. And I know I was concussed. I was dizzy. I was seeing, like, the lights were making those stars that they make whenever you have a concussion. I don't know if you guys have ever had a concussion, but when you look up at the lights, they make, like, a bunch of little stars and all this junk. And your head hurts like crazy. So I told the coach, hey, coach, I think I concussed myself. And I know the story is bogus. But instead of letting me, like, rest, he made me sit there and feel bad the whole time my team was, like, running laps. To make an example of me. And it was such bullshit, and I'll never forget it. So, to that coach, you're the reason that I quit playing basketball. I loved the sport, but, like, really had it ruined in that. I wasn't very good. But, anyway, I don't think that could have been the next Larry Bird, exactly, but this guy ruined the sport for me. So, anyway, fuck him and what he believes good leadership is. Because then I asked him. He was going back and forth with my mother, and I was like, okay, well, what's a leadership quality that Trump has shown you? And all he said was, whoa, Vince, you got it bad. Man, you got your head so far in the sand. Why don't you watch something else? Why don't you turn on to Rush Limbaugh? I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I asked you a question. I asked you to show me one time in the past 3 years. 4 years that the president has shown you an ounce of leadership that you say he has shown. Your argument was that he's a good leader, and I asked you to show me that. And they can't do it because there are no instances of it, because they are just blindly following the person who says the racist, sexist, terrible things, xenophobic things that they hold deep in their hearts and don't want to admit to believing, so they can say it politely still and continue to politely be the awful, closed-minded people that they are. And I don't feel bad saying that, because that is clearly the honest-to-God truth of these people. There's a person in the White House right now who, for the past month and a half, think about what has happened for the past month and a half. I'm not going to restate everything. I'm not going to rehash everything. Just think for a second about everything going on in the country right now. Instead of handling that, he has gone to rallies. He has complained about his press coverage. He has gone on Sean Hannity and complained about his press coverage. He has gone to a rally with a bunch of college students in Arizona, 3,000 people packed into a room where cases are the highest. Positive test rates are the highest in the nation. And he filled a room with 3,000 people, told them not to wear masks, called it the Kung Flu, and said there's so many names for coronavirus. This is the fucking president. There's 19 different names for the coronavirus, he says, and nobody knows what the 19 really stands for. What is it? People around me didn't even know what it stood for. And it's true. It's true. Kellyanne Conway, as you'll remember, famously said, it's COVID-19. It ain't COVID-1. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? These are the people leading us through this. And people are blindly fine to do it because they don't want to seek out anything other than the safe space of Rush Limbaugh and Fox News and Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Mark Levin and all this. There is an absolute sickness in this country, and it is right-wing journalism, because it fuels this president of ours who's just falling ass backwards into, like, totalitarianism, into some kind of a dictatorship. He's literally falling ass backwards into it because the media allows him to do it. The people in this right-wing media atmosphere have allowed him and allowed their viewers to believe that this kind of act, this kind of leadership, is normal and fine to expect from people, whenever that is far from the case, because, again, it is costing hundreds of thousands of lives. Literally, 122,000 people are dead in this country because the president refused to wear a mask and refuses to take this seriously. It is staggering that you can get into conversation with people still that will try to say that this man is a good leader and that he has done good for this country. And it's up to us all. I closed the podcast with this last week, but it's up to us all to take that on any chance we get. If you have to arm yourself with 30 news articles in a comment section, put 30 news articles in a comment section from somewhere that isn't Fox News or isn't the Drudge Report or isn't the what's the one that what's his face came from? Stephen what Stephen Miller used to write for, the Independent or the National? It's some white nationalist newspaper. Huh? Not Breitbart, but Breitbart also just as bad. Post them something that they're not getting, because these people are just miseducated. I do not believe that the man who ruined basketball for me is honestly a bad dude. Shitty leader, not the best coach, maybe a bit of a bad dude, but I also think that he might just be miseducated on a lot of topics because the public school system failed most of these boomers, let's be honest. Failed most of us, let's be honest. We shouldn't have to find out about black history from TV shows. That shouldn't be how we have to learn about things. It's nice that we get to, but we shouldn't have to. But the argument that he is a good leader is so bogus. It's so nonsensical. Here's a good example of leadership from Donald Trump. I'm pulling it right from his Twitter here. A Fox News commentator just ripped me with lies, with nobody defending. They talked about the friendly protesters. They set the church on fire the day before. They were anything but friendly. And how I stood and held the Bible upside down. It wasn't upside down. This is literally yesterday at 10:45 in the morning, again when coronavirus cases were hitting record highs across the across southern states and western states. The president was complaining about him getting torched on Fox News by somebody without anybody defending him. Real leadership right there. Real leadership. And it's important to remember that this isn't just a Trump problem. It's the whole entire Republican Party. They're all a bunch of little babies with no leadership skills. That's what we're finding out. Even the worst of them. I mean, you could argue Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton has the ability to be a smart version of Donald Trump, which is very dangerous because that's like his whole goal for 2024. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but there's a debate right now about making D.C. a state. I think they're voting on it today. I'm in favor of it. I have no real reason to be. I just think it would be great for D.C. to be a state. I think it makes sense. It's where all of our all of our governing goes on. There's enough population there for it to be its own state. It's larger than it has a larger population than I believe Dakota or Montana or a couple of states in the Big Sky region. So it's already got more population than a lot of places. But Tom Cotton went up and tried to say that because those people are just like DC people, he tried to make it sound like everybody that lives in DC is just like politicians and broadcasters and like pundits and like tax collectors and shit like that. Whenever that's not the case, there is like a full working community and a diverse community in DC that isn't just like white politicians. And he tried to make the case that because places like Dakota and Montana, that they have smaller populations, they have more real workers, whatever that's supposed to mean, though it sounds like a dog whistle for white folk. He has the ability, Tom Cotton, because he can make that kind of argument and not sound like a total idiot. You'll notice when Trump tries to do that, he sounds like a total idiot. But when Cotton does it, he at least disguises it well enough that people like Tea Party style Republicans will buy into that shit because they're sheep and smart enough words will move the needle for them as long as they're saying enough things that they agree with. But a prime example of Republican leadership and Trump-style leadership and the Trump Republican Party that people will have to live with if they continue to blindly follow is, why can't I think of his name? Louie Gohmert, the representative from Texas. They had a grand jury session, not a grand jury session, they had a Senate Judiciary hearing from a whistleblower in the Department of Justice about Bill Barr politicizing the Department of Justice to benefit people that are close to the president and himself. One of the key ones was they were talking about Roger Stone, how the lead prosecutor in the Roger Stone sentencing recused himself, saying that he thought that the Department of Justice was giving him a better sentence strictly because he was the president's friend, as close to the president as he was. So they had this grand jury I keep saying grand jury, but it's not grand jury. They had this Senate testimony, and not even Senate. They had this testimony in the House. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, everybody. In the House, they had this hearing on, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday, and a member from the Department of Justice was giving a pretty scathing opening mark about Bill Barr weaponizing the Department of Justice, and toward the end he started to run over his time. Lou Gohmert, the representative from Texas, freaked the fuck out like an absolute little baby and started pounding his pen on the table like a gavel, loudly enough that you couldn't hear the testimony being given, because he knew the testimony being given would not be beneficial to him and other Republicans who have allowed Bill Barr and Donald Trump to weaponize our government against private citizens and for favor of their friends. So he sat there pounding his pen, pretending it's a gavel, trying to make a point, and then he starts going back and forth with Nadler, because Nadler finally calls him out. Jerry Nadler, let him go for too long. And worth noting here, they keep letting Republicans get away with this, and I wish they wouldn't. Pelosi and everybody involved needs to step up and really start enforcing the rules in the House. They're supposed to be wearing masks in the House, and I think it would be great, and I know you don't want to make a huge example and create the optics of, the Capitol Police. I forget what they're called. Sergeant-at-Arms? Whatever, whoever it is in charge of pulling people out of the House of Representatives and out of the Senate whenever they're being disorderly. I know you don't want to create the optics of pulling, Jim Jordan out with 2 police officers, dragging him or whatever, but you might have to do it because people like Louie Gohmert and people like Ted Cruz and people like, Jim Jordan keep refusing to wear masks, and they keep going into these chambers with people. Jerry Nadler's wife is at home with cancer. She's trying to get through a cancer right now. And here's Jerry Nadler having to literally interact with Will Gohmert without Will Gohmert wearing a mask. And it's again, just wear a fucking mask so you can protect Jerry Nadler's wife for a second. I don't love Jerry Nadler, but his wife doesn't need to die because you're not wearing a mask, Lou Gohmert. It's just not right. So him and Louie Gohmert start going back and forth, and Louie Gohmert starts going, "Oh, but you keep letting him keep going on. It's been over 2 minutes, and he got to keep talking. But every time we go over time, you gavel us down. You keep gaveling us down and taking away our rights to speak in the chamber, and all this and that." And it's such absolute bullshit and such a bad faith argument, because clearly all Louie Gohmert was trying to do was keep testimony from being entered into the record, clearly, which it didn't stop, because they're still able to enter witness testimony. All they have to do is type it on a fucking keyboard. It's not like he was stopping anybody from hearing it either. It was just being a big baby about it. And that's the kind of leadership you get from the Republican Party. And if I'm a voter, and if I'm a voter in places that are being ravished by coronavirus right now, if I'm a voter in Florida, if I'm a voter in Texas, if I'm a voter in Arizona, if I'm a voter in Los Angeles, California, anywhere, and we're seeing a rise in cases after my governor or after my state leaders decide to reopen us too soon, I'm voting every single one of them out. And I'm voting the person who is in charge of them out. And that's the president, because this is his party. This is what he's led them to a bunch of conspiracy theorists, a bunch of bad faith, phony patriots, if you will, who keep acting as if their rights are being violated, even though they're allowed to go and speak in front of, again, the highest governing body in the land, and they get to go and talk and do whatever they want, say what they believe, and here's my podcast, and then they complain about their freedom of speech, and it just doesn't make any sense, and it's so hypocritical, and again, in bad faith, and it's not leadership. It's not what we need right now. And it's just so telling that was Louie Gohmert's go-to in that moment. He couldn't wait till his cross-examination to come around. He went right to kicking and screaming, because that's what the president does. Again, the president has spent the last month and a half kicking and screaming about his press coverage, be it on Twitter, at these rallies, wherever. Even if he's just talking to factory workers in Michigan, he finds a way to complain about his poll numbers, complain about the way he's being sold to people. And he went on Hannity last night and said that I might not be president because some people don't love me. Not everybody loves me, he said. It's not what being the president is about. It's not that we don't love you. I didn't necessarily love President Obama. I shouldn't have liked Bush as much as I did, but I didn't really love everything George Bush did. You're not supposed to love a president uncontrollably. You're not supposed to love politicians uncontrollably. You're not supposed to blindly follow politicians into the abyss. And that brings us to what we're going to close on today. There was I'm back to Facebook for this. Someone was posting on Facebook yesterday that they thought they found some deep hidden video of Joe Biden fighting against civil rights, and they found video of him fighting against busing and all of his old voting records, and there was an interview of him talking about his old voting record, painting him as some kind of villain. And they act like the person who posted it was like, "Oh, found this about Joe Biden. Things aren't looking so good now, are they, Joe?" And I'm like, how fucking stupid do you think we are in the Democratic Party? how much projecting does the Republican Party have to do? They don't vet their candidates. At any time they see something about a Democratic candidate, they act like it's the first time any of us have heard it before, because they don't think that we vet our candidates, because they don't vet their candidates. The person was acting as if we had no idea that Joe Biden had a bad voting record in the past. We all fucking know Joe Biden sucks. We know that, but we know he's the better option. We know that he doesn't suck as much anymore. That's the other great thing about Joe Biden and the difference between President Trump and Joe Biden in all of this. Joe Biden has grown as a person, as a politician. He's worked to better himself in his political positions, and he's done the work, and he's empathetic, and he's grown as a person. The president has had 4 years to do a good job. He has had 4 years to find some kind of growth in himself, to become a better politician, to become a better leader. But instead, all he has done is blame the previous administrations for literally everything. He even did the ventilators. Let's talk about the ventilators for a second. A report came out this week that while the president was complaining that President Obama left him with 0 ventilators, he left him with 1,600 or 1,600 ventilators. I don't have the number in front of me, but there was a stock left of them. A stock they didn't end up having to use. So while he was complaining and pushing blame for everything, the world and the country are falling apart around him, and he is again worried about his poll numbers, and he's going on Sean Hannity and talking about how people don't like him, and about how he, Biden's going to do this when he's president because I'm not going to win because people don't like me. Let me pull it up here. And that's not the reason. That's not the reason people aren't. So he seems stuck, and a lot of Republicans are stuck on why is he having trouble this election? And it's not that he's having trouble. He's underperforming where he was performing in 2016, which is great news for everybody. And Joe Biden's outperforming Hillary Clinton, where Hillary Clinton was performing at this point in 2016, which is great news for everybody. But they keep looking and blaming the wrong things, or pushing the blame off on the wrong things, and it allows for the party to continue to blindly follow Donald Trump despite every bit of evidence to the contrary. The exact thing they blame Democrats of doing with our presidential candidate, or with any of our political candidates. They write books about it. But they act as if we don't do the vetting first, that we don't look into our candidates. And granted, again, Joe Biden is not the candidate we wanted. It's the candidate we have, but we're also willing to accept that he's better than the candidate on the other side. And most of the country is doing that because the candidate on the other side, Joe Biden, at least has a fucking message to give. Again, Trump went on Hannity last night. And it's been a theme of this week. Trump has been trying to restart his presidential reelection campaign. It's been an absolute mess. He tried it in Tulsa. Nobody showed up. He went to that rally in Arizona. It was fine, but he said a bunch of dumb shit that took away from his message. And there isn't a message, as we have found out. Because then he goes on Hannity, and Hannity asks him, what's your top priority items for a second term? What's Trump 2020 actually all about? Now, this is the softest of softball questions. A chance for the president to give the platform for his campaign without anyone fighting back against him, without anybody saying anything to him. And this is what he said. See if I can get it to work here. We're playing a clip.
Here in 131 days from now, at some point in the night or early morning, we can now project Donald J. Trump has been reelected the 45th president of the United States. Let's talk. What's at stake in this election as you compare and contrast, and what are your top priority items for a second term?
Well, one of the things that will be really great, the word experience is still good. I always say talent is more important than experience. I've always said that. But the word experience is a very important word. It's a very important meaning. I never did this before. I never slept over in Washington. I was in Washington, I think, 17 times. All of a sudden, I'm president of the United States. You know the story. I'm riding down Pennsylvania Avenue with our first lady, and I say, this is great. But I didn't know very many people in Washington. It wasn't my thing. I was from Manhattan, from New York. Now I know everybody. And I have great people in the administration. You make some mistakes, like, an idiot like Bolton. All he wanted to do is drop bombs on everybody. You don't have to drop bombs on everybody. You don't have to kill people.
Makes a hell of a yard sign, doesn't it? Put that on the yard signs. Trump 2020 and throw that on it too. Jesus Christ. That's why the president is lagging in the polls. That's why the president has fallen behind how he has. And there's still a lot of work to be done. Don't get me wrong. This election is far from over. This process is far from over. The polls are going to narrow. I know as of yesterday, Biden was up 9% in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has been called the tipping point by the 538. If he wins Pennsylvania, he can win the whole thing. And he's up 9 points. And that's going to shrink. There will be stories that come out over the next few months, stupid little conspiracy theories that have enough to them that people will be like, oh, well, maybe that is something. It didn't take much in 2016. Remember, Comey put all that email shit together in October, and it really fucked up literally everything. So thank you, Jim Comey. But there is still a lot that can happen. However, with the way the Death Star is being run over there at Trump 2020 headquarters, it's going to be hard for them to make up a lot of this ground, especially whenever there is no real message for their campaign. We talked about it a lot earlier during the primary process. What was the message for these campaigns? What's the message going to be for Democrats going forward? And it's going to be important to stick on that message. Because, honestly, that's where Democrats are going to win on policy. And I believe the Trump campaign knows that because they clearly have no policy for 2020 and into 2024. There is no policy other than just breakneck fall into totalitarianism. That's the plan, as has been proven to us. The president doesn't have a message for 2020. He doesn't know why he's running for president in 2020. In 2016, there was at least a small bit of message there. He was an outsider. He was against minorities, which we already know. Like, there's nothing new for this president. He's an outsider. There's no benefit of the doubt for him. He's not running against Hillary Clinton. He's running against Joe Biden, who has been outperforming against Hillary Clinton. It's a totally different story, and you're starting to see it really take an effect on him. He even admitted last night that Joe Biden's going to be president. He said it. Now, we can't rest and act like that is true, though, because we know Republicans will cheat to win. That's what they did already. They tried to do it in Kentucky to try to... Well, the Democrats might have done it in Kentucky to try to keep Charles Booker from winning his primary. But we've seen them actively use voter suppression in these states that are run by Republicans. And we know that's going to be their blueprint to win in 2020 because they can't win. They can't win on messaging. They can't win on policy. We'll close on this. Prime example, in the middle of a pandemic that has killed 122,000 people, that has put 40 million people on unemployment, cost 22,000 Americans, I think 25, excuse me, was it 25 million? I think 25 million Americans were thrown off their health insurance coverage because it came through their employers. Yesterday, Donald Trump and his administration filed a brief with the with the Supreme Court, filed a brief in the Supreme Court to end protections for pre-existing conditions as part of the ACA. At a time when more people are signing up for the ACA than ever before, the president's big plan for health care in this country going into an election in the middle of a pandemic was to make healthcare harder and less affordable for people who recently lost their jobs because of the coronavirus that he helped exacerbate. I know it's not all his fault, but he and his administration did not act quick enough. They underplayed it, and it is why we are here now. Because of that, again, more than 20 million Americans lost their health insurance in the past 3 months, and they have sought out the ACA to get that insurance. The president and the Republican Party's big plan here, their policy for this pandemic, is to make healthcare less affordable and harder to get to. And that is all you need to know about the Republican Party going into 2020 and what their plan is. Their plan is just to make life harder for everybody that isn't a rich person. I know it doesn't sound exactly intelligent when you say it like that, but that's the plan. That's the plan, is just to keep plugging away and weakening democracy and making life harder for people from lower incomes and continue to fatten up the rich. That's the plan here, and that's what they're working toward. And there is no way to put that on a sign. There is no way to make a slogan of that. So whenever the president is asked what the message is, you get what he gave Hannity. Thank you guys for listening. Keep on fighting online. If you're getting tired of fighting with people on Facebook, don't, because that's where the fight is. We have to stay there, and we have to stand our ground. So arm yourself with facts, arm yourself with knowledge on what you're talking about. That way, when people try to come for you, you can take them down and make them look like idiots. All right, so thank you guys for listening. We will be back on Tuesday Again, rate, subscribe, do all the things for a program that you like. Do it for us. Have a great have a great weekend. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening.